a couple of people joining, but let me get started. So we just have the screen up, so when people are signing on that they could see that they joined our webinar, but I'm just going to stop the share because our webinar is going to be more of a conversation between us today and Agreena. So officially, I want to thank everyone for joining Avallone's webinar with Agreena. This session is being recorded, so anyone who wasn't able to attend today is going to be able to watch this later on. For those of you who are here, if you have any questions, you'll be able to ask them in the Q&A button, which is on the bottom of the Zoom toolbar. It's got kind of a double window or double little bubble, if you will. And then as you're asking them, or maybe at the end of them, depending on when the questions are asked, we'll have time to make sure that we review and address any questions from the audience. So with that, I think what I'll do is just to give a quick verbal overview for our agenda today. It's going to be about a 40-minute discussion that Rasmus, Harold, and Sune and I will have. And then after, again, there'll be time for questions from the audience. And for those of you who are watching this recording, we'll have an email address that you can also send us any questions you have after watching the video, and our team will be happy to answer them. So I'm going to start with a quick introduction of the four of us. For myself, I'm Ada Chan. I'm the VP of Strategy and Planning. And amongst many things that I do in our startup, I also work on the concept and development of our evangelism and outreach efforts. I've worked in a number of industries, but in the past decade or so, I've really focused in on working in the ethics and compliance space. So today, I'll be guiding us through our webinar. So then what I wanted to do is have our guests from Agreena start and give a quick introduction. Rasmus, would you give a quick introduction of your background and what you do at Agreena?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for having us. My name is Rasmus. I have a background, actually a little bit odd one. I have a PhD in biotechnology, but have been working with consulting and banking up until the point when I joined Agreena 2 years ago. So I've been using that background to be more efficient in what we've done, and that included, of course, also the KYC work that we've been doing with Avallone, especially last year, but also continuing now.
Great, thanks, Rasmus. And Harold, who's also from Agreena, if you can speak a little bit about yourself.
Yes, I am Harold, and I'm working as a customer success manager in Agreena. And I have been working in Agreena for the almost last 3 years. And my main job is to kind of be the vocal point between the farmers and Agreena, mainly in Denmark. Before starting in Agreena, I have studied agriculture economics and have a master's degree of that out of University of Copenhagen, and was born and raised on a farm here in Denmark. So I have quite a bit of agricultural knowledge, which is quite helpful in my job. So I'm glad to be here.
Great. Thank you so much. That's super cool. And last but not least, for those of you who have previously joined one of Avallone's webinars, you'll probably be familiar with Sune. But for those who have not, Sune, could you introduce yourself and a little bit about your background?
Yeah, of course. So hi, everybody. I'm Sune. I'm the VP of Customer Success and Financial Crime Prevention in Avallone. My past is like Rasmus in banking. I've been there for 23 years, and the last 10 years I worked with compliance and financial crime prevention. So yeah, that's my background.
Cool. Thank you so much. So to start, maybe, I think the audience would be good to give everyone a background about Agreena. So Harold, maybe you could give a high-level overview of Agreena and what Agreena does.
Yeah, for sure. So Agreena is Europe's top carbon farming crediting program, which means that we help farmers actively transition towards regenerative agriculture by providing financial incentives for them. And we have more than 1,000 farmers as part of our program across 18 countries all over Europe. And at the moment, we are more than 250 employees within the Agreena family, which have grown from around 3 years ago to now more than 250. So we have grown quite rapidly. Yeah. So that's Agreena, very high level.
Great. Thank you so much. And it's such an interesting and inspirational company to be part of, especially with the quick growth and and kind of what you do, especially involving the environment and things like that. So I think most of our audience knows what KYC is. But just in case anyone is new to this, or also just to kind of give a context of our conversation, very quickly, I'll just give a short definition. So, the textbook definition is that KYC is an acronym that stands for Know Your Customer. It is a term that very broadly covers all the processes and procedures that, are designed to help verify the identity and also assess the suitability of a customer before you start working with them in a business relationship or as such. So, of course, you might wonder, why do we do KYC? And overall, the reason to do KYC is because it's part of a larger framework to, combat financial criminal activity. So things like money laundering, counterterrorism financing, and the like. So you really want to be doing these your KYC processes to ensure that you're documenting and showing that you're making sure you're not working with anyone who is in these potentially or working in these criminal activities. KYC regulations do apply to businesses that deal with financial transactions. Typically, most people think that KYC is for banks, insurance companies, investment firms, things like that. But that's, again, we're going to talk a little about it, but that's the typical sort of person on the street. Well, that's what they think KYC is related to. And then, of course, the KYC process also typically involves like several main steps. Of course, it can be quite a bit of a process. Of course, it's not that simple, but if I kind of boil it down, the first step is really to collect information about the customer, and then to take this information to help with the verification. So you're looking at things like identity documents, proof of address, whether it's the business address or the personal address, funding sources, and like. So after that, of course, ensuing steps will include assessing the risk of the customer engaging if you find anyone that might be doing an illegal activity. And also what's critical for all these steps is performing a very thorough screening, which is basically making sure that the counterparty or the customer, whoever you're potentially working with, is not on sanctions lists, or they're a politically exposed person or involved with one, or they have like adverse media mentions or things like that. And also it's very important that the results are viewed carefully. So I think, just to give some context, that's what KYC is, and some of the kind of the key steps, if you will, with that. So now that I've given this kind of brief definition of KYC and talked a little bit about the legislative requirement in some areas, if you will, I want to turn it back to what we all came here for, which is about Agreena. So with Agreena's focus on carbon and agriculture, why do you need to do KYC? And I ask this because it's not super obvious. It's not an industry that is regulated. So I guess, were there some general needs that you foresaw, or risks or vulnerabilities? Erasmus, I think it's probably you're a good person to answer this question.
Yeah. And as you say, it isn't actually obvious that you would need something like KYC to do a carbon program. So there are a few risk elements that we're facing in our business, and one is that the carbon credits that we produce, although they are not financial instruments, they do look like them in many ways. And while they're not regulated, we made a strategic decision early on to pretend that they were, and therefore try to manage the inherent risks in dealing with such instruments by being prepared for what came, and by mitigating the risks that were involved in it. And in our case, we have lots of business in Eastern Europe. We have lots of business in countries which have traditionally been plagued by high levels of corruption. And it was extremely important to us to make sure that one thing, that we actually knew who our counterparties were, but also make sure that we didn't end up in a situation where we paid people that really shouldn't be paid. Seen from a sanctions point of view. And of course, when you're an organization like ours, at that time, we were growing very fast. We had a very, very capable customer success team, but we didn't have any KYC experts, except for those of us who came from banking and understood the need. So it was a little bit a leaning forward decision, but already at that time we could also see that that it was something that investors were worried about. How do we make sure that we don't end up paying the wrong entities or persons?
Great. Yeah, that's really forward thinking. I think it's very it shows again to the kind of innovation, if you will, with Agreena and the company. Even though you're fast growing, you're really kind of seeing all the like watching out for future steps. So after you identified the need to perform KYC, did you feel that you could set this up yourselves? In terms of like, what did you think? What were the initial challenges or steps that you had on the Agreena side, Rasmus?
Well, I think first of all, because there were quite a few ex-bankers in Agreena, we understood the need, and that may not have been obvious or be obvious to many other startups. But on the other hand, we also knew that even though we might be able to create our own questionnaire and collect information on our farmers, our customers, we would simply not be able to do that in a scalable way, and we just needed help with that, and we knew Avallone in advance because we'd actually shared office space for a short while. And we also knew that Avallone were amongst the very few that actually had a strong hands-on experience with dealing with such things. And in any case, even if we had to do it ourselves, we would never be able to have an ongoing screening of counterparties. So it really wasn't an option to us to do it ourselves.
Well, we're so happy that you reached out to us for assistance, and I think we're just more than happy to help. And I feel like cart before the horse for this webinar, but I think it's been a very good collaboration together. So Sune, when you and the FCP team were asked to, tasked to kind of work with Agreena and help them with getting started, what were your initial thoughts on the approach and starting point? Like before you even got started, what were you thinking?
Yeah, so first of all, it was kind of interesting to be a part of this. As I said, we have the shared office with Agreena before, and it was some of our good friends, and now we actually also had a work relation we need to fix. What I think was kind of the immediate thing was that we could see that there was a way to get something up and running quickly. And therefore we kind of thought in, how do we do that? And I think one of the things that many companies probably do wrong is that they want to do everything right the first time. But here it was a clear ambition. Let's get something out fast. So we also talked about, how can we make this in phases, and how can we do something basic as a starting point.
Great, that sounds good. So I think with starting, not being perfect, as you said, but just getting started and getting, a lot of the key requirements, worked out in this first initial step. Did you see any key blockers or challenges with that?
Yeah, so I think we have in Avallone, we have spent a lot of time focusing on making tools that is really useful for these processes, but we maybe didn't think too much about before, what does it take to start up using the tool? And I think in the discussion with Agreena, we saw that, of course, they knew something about KYC, but the in-house knowledge of how to handle all these information coming in was maybe not that big as a starting point. So there was kind of a steep learning curve ahead, which we need to consider. Also, I think especially the screening handling. So when you get a screening result out of a screening engine, what to do with that, how to handle the alerts, that's actually not a straightforward thing. So I think quite early we also recognized that Agreena didn't have the competences for that, and they asked us to try to do that for them. And then I think also quite fast in the process, and that probably came from the customer success team, we saw that sending out questionnaires in English to all kind of farmers in most of Europe was not going to fly. So we also need to kind of handle a quite big language and also country complexity issue.
Okay. So then I guess, working together, what were the key sort of elements now. So you kind of had a certain approach, certain challenges you identified, but what do you like, what were the key points of phase one for you then to start?
So I think first of all that we did some basic training together. We also kind of designed a very basic process, kind of identifying what was the most important information to collect, what was the most important risk mitigation steps to take. And then it was also like, let's just get started, which I think is also with Agreena, that they are not afraid to do something. So it was just like, let's get it out there and see what happens. And we did.
Yeah, cool. So I think
if I may just cut in here,
Yeah.
there was a very strong learning from our side, which was exactly that it was actually difficult for us to handle it. What do you do if you get a positive screening result from someone? You know, is it severe? Is it just a small thing? How do you put that into a scale? And we really needed help with that. We in general wanted as much help as we could from Avallone to make this work, to have as much of an outsourcing setup as we could. That wasn't really available at the time, but it's something that Avallone has been really good at developing since we started working together, and we use that heavily now.
Yes, yeah, we do. So yeah, I think it was something that we were learning together and kind of helping each other with that. So I think that was really, really beneficial with that. I think one kind of like super cool thing that I, from not being hands-on with, as Sune is with like our financial crime prevention team, but with this structured approach, I remember that, what we did was with Agreena is that once we got started, getting started meant that Agreena used your customer success team to work on the KYC outreach and collection. So I think the initial parameters, I was quite familiar with like, hearing about, gathering the right data points and things like that. But it is really interesting that, having your customer success team, I'll use the acronym CS because it's a little bit faster to say, but having the Agreena CS team basically send out the questionnaires via the Avallone platform, doing the follow-up and making sure that, having the KYC for all the, and I think it was several hundred, correct me if I'm wrong, but several hundred of your customers, your farmers, it's not traditional to have that. So, a lot of other companies that we, are out there can have like a specific KYC team. So I think it'd be nice for you guys at Agreena to talk a little bit about why you decided to do it this way.
Yeah, maybe I can chip in on that. I think that the decision was that, as you just mentioned, that some companies have like specific KYC teams, which wasn't the case, or there wasn't a option to get that right away when we started this process of doing KYC. So I think that the natural was to put this on the CS team within Agreena. And as Sune mentioned before, we have a broad reach within Europe, so this also covers a lot of languages. And then we also, like, the importance of doing this the right way also meant that we decided that we needed to be able to handle this in a local language. And within Agreena, we are covering all the languages that we are represented within the customer success team. So we kind of took it upon us, as we're also trying to be like the vocal point between the customer and Agreena within the CS team, and it is part of our job. So it kind of came a bit natural that we decided to do it with the CS team. And I think the main reason for doing it through the CS team was of course the language aspect of it, which was really good to cover that.
Yeah, and I think, having worked in CS myself and in other previous positions, I would think that it's actually really good because it puts the customer experience first, that basically I'm not just a customer getting a random questionnaire or some sort of form to fill out. I really understand, or I have a contact that I've been working with that can kind of take me through some of them. So I'm sure, like, even with this approach, with all the benefits, there were probably a couple of challenges. So maybe, is there any sticky points that in this initial sort of phase of getting started that we had with like CS working with KYC?
I think that the main challenge was that a lot of me and my colleagues have never worked or actually not heard of KYC before. So there was a pretty steep learning curve also here for us to kind of learn what does this cover, and we are quite young team, so none of us had the 25 years of experience in banking or anything. So we really had to take it upon us and rely on the expertise of you guys in Avallone, and kind of have some sessions where we could kind of get to learn it quite fast. And then as well, the first phase also included that some of us within the CS team had to approve the questionnaires and kind of approve the data. So we also had to learn what to check for, what to look for, and another challenge within that of the checking was that we are in the phase 1, we were represented in 13 countries, so that each and every country kind of have their like the national documents. So as well as that, we also had to learn on what to look for. What does a Spanish contra a Danish document of ownership and control structure look like? So a lot of things we had to learn and just take upon us to kind of learn, and then really rely on your expertise and your support. So a lot of challenges we experienced.
Yeah, but I mean, I have to say, from what I was hearing from Suni and the team, you guys did a fantastic job with dealing that. So really bravo for you guys taking on the challenge and the initiative of doing that. So after phase 1 was finished, which again, just to reiterate for the audience, because I know sometimes the 4 of us are quite intimately aware of the details, but after phase 1 was done, which is collecting the initial KYC from several hundred of Agreena's customers who are farmers, then I believe over the course of which I believe is like a couple of months, so I don't think it was like a super long time. So we really kind of, again, kudos to the CS team for really getting all this kind of wrapped up quite quickly for this initial step. What would you guys all say was your experience overall at the end of these couple of months? What did you find? Maybe Rasmus, we can start with you for your kind of perspective after the fact.
Yeah, many learnings. One of them actually being, how on earth did we manage to do this so fast? I think looking back at it, from when we started working on this for real, it took somewhere between 2 and 3 months, and we had actually KYC'd almost all of our customers, and I think that in itself is an incredible achievement, and while we never really doubted that we could do it at the time, looking back at it, I think that was actually quite extraordinary. But I also think we had some learnings about the organization, because as I said, some of us came from banking, and KYC is just old news to us. But it's really something quite exotic if you're relatively newly educated in forestry, farming, or agriculture, and you're supporting farmers across Europe, and then suddenly you're presented with this task, and it is actually something that can be a little scary. And I think quite a lot of our quite incredible CS team were feeling that this was not only odd, but also a little bit like going into to something sort of clandestine, or somehow unpleasant. I think one of the learnings that we had is that it actually takes quite a lot of education and information to make sure that the organization is comfortable with something like that. And my God, did they rise to the occasion? But it was not always an easy task for them, very clearly. Another learning is that if you want to persuade your customers to go through KYC, it really helps to have an incentive for them. We did our process up until the point where we had to pay them, and we had decided on a principle that we cannot pay anybody we don't know who is, and that meant that it was just, if you want the money, then you have to go through this, and that actually meant that almost all of them, or at least those who were interested in being prepaid by us, they went through it, and we now have that part of our customer base, which is most of them, at least the ones that were at the program at the time. They have gone through KYC, and we're now ready to review that with them, rather than having to do it for the first time, which, given how fast we grow, there'll be plenty that we need to KYC for the first time this year.
It's super cool. What about you, Harold? What were some of your your observations?
I think that like just touch upon in what we talked about before, of like why we did this aside the CS team had to do it and so on. I think that like the main experience was to just learn all of this about what is KYC, why is it important, and like also seeing that with good coordination and good communication that you could come quite far in quite a short time, and come up with a product and a tool that was quite effective, especially taking into account that we had to cover so many countries, so many languages, and that we within our CS team are willing and to adapt and kind of take upon challenges. So yeah, I must just give a big shout out to my colleagues in the customer success team in Agreena for starting on working on something that is quite off of what we are normally handling and what we are working with. So that was like a big experience for the entire team to kind of learn and kind of see such a rapid development happen. So yeah, a lot of experiences and learning in this phase one.
Super cool. And then also, Sune, yeah, what was your experience at the end of phase one?
No, I think I can echo the part with how much you can do in a short time. So I think I think that's an important learning in general for people who want to start maturing on this area. Just start on the area that start collecting information. You can do a lot really fast, but also you can for that kind of phase one that Agreena did, a lot of valuable knowledge come in. Like, so the next time you can use it to improve your setup, right? So that kind of knowledge you get out of that is important. And it's always like, you normally say the devil is in the detail. It's like, and that's definitely the thing when we talk about financial crime prevention. So like, it's easy to say you have to collect a company number, but then when most farmers in Spain do not have company numbers, they have something else. What do you do? So I think it's kind of, each country came up with their own complexity. And that's also a learning that you can do something that is more or less the same requirement for everybody across countries, but there will always be some few details you need to sort out when you start talking to your counterparties. And then I just think that it also shows that taking from a practical approach instead of be too theoretically is also kind of a good thing.
Yeah. Really cool with all their experiences. So before we kind of leave phase one and start talking about phase two, we call things phase one, obviously leading kind of there's a phase two. How would you guys summarize like a key learning that you had from doing phase one? Maybe Harold, we can start with you as the main lead with all the farmer outreach and contact.
Yeah, as I think that like the big learnings was like, as Sune just mentioned, that is that each and every country has relatively large differences in how they are organized in relation to company numbers, how they are in structures of companies and so on. So we really learned that each and every country can be very different from each other. So we had to like learn a lot on how we could handle and what to check for. And then I think something that has been also a quite big learning from this phase one was that at least with our customers, simplicity is very important. So making these questionnaires as simple and as well defined as possible makes the process a lot easier and kind of makes limit the amount of touch points back and forth between the customer success team and the farmer, which I think is a huge learning and something that we will bring forward in the next phase.
Super smart. What about you, Rasmus?
Well, first of all, you can be as prepared as you possibly can, and you'll still be surprised with the issues you run into. the issue of some farmers using personal ID numbers rather than commercial created a lot of problems. There are also areas in Europe where it's actually very difficult to have a bank account. And so how do you pay them? And it just all these things that you never thought of, they just pop up, and you need to deal with them. And there's not really any other way to do it than to push through and just make sure that you find a solution.
Yeah. Super cool for that. So then, you know, once phase one was wrapped up, and again, we talked about how quickly it was done. Agreena, you had indicated that you wanted to kind of proceed with the next evolution. So, you know, logically for everyone in the audience, phase two. So I think, you know, in your mind on Agreena's side, what were you thinking about in terms of like differences or components that would kind of be part of phase two?
Yeah, so I think that broadly speaking, it was kind of taking all the learnings as we just mentioned and bring them in to the next phase and kind of refining our KYC program so that it suited the needs and like it like kind of included the learnings that we have from phase one. And then we also, as both Sune and Rasmus have mentioned quite a lot, that there was all these regional complexity that we discovered with, for example, the different VAT numbers, the company structure, and so on. So how do we handle this in the future, and also us going into new countries within Europe, and how can we also take the learnings from phase one and then build that in towards a phase two rollout?
Mm-hmm. So then with these learnings and kind of like the key components of what you wanted to have in phase two, maybe Rasmus and Sune, you guys can talk a little bit about, you know, what were how did you design this phase two and then the rollout of phase two?
Well, if I can start, I think one of the things that you learn quickly is that when you start looking, you will find things. And we were in a situation where we discovered things that came up in our screenings. And one thing is that suddenly meant that we have to have a process for how do we actually escalate those and deal with them and document the decisions taken. But it also means that in some cases you're just faced with situations where you really need to act on something and you don't know what to do. And I think that was actually a very, very good learning we had last summer, that when we were in such a situation, we were able to call Avallone and ask for help with that. Also, if there's something a little more complex than just dealing with the basic problems. And that experience also taught us that we needed to mature even further. Now we had collected the data, but we actually needed to set up the internal structures and governance to make sure that we actually anchored this very clearly in our organization. And Sune had a very not difficult but busy summer last year, where he did a tremendous job together with me to actually prepare that.
Yes, absolutely. I remember. Maybe Sune, you can walk us through some of like just high level bullet points quickly of some of like the deliverables, if you will, the things that you and Rasmus kind of worked on building.
Yeah, but I think we kind of took all the learnings from the phase one and tried to use that to build up a financial crime prevention framework. So kind of being a bit more traditional. So normally, I think any risk officer would say the first thing you have to do is to build a risk assessment before you do anything with policy and procedures. So this way we did it a bit the other way around, but then it was much easier to write a risk assessment because we got a lot of insight into the different countries, the different kind of farmers, the different areas of the business. So it's kind of, we had a lot of good inputs to make a rather good risk assessment. Of course, you should continue building on that, but that was a really good starting point for that. And the same when start building policies and procedures, it was like, we knew what the old process was, and then we also knew where we need to improve or maybe do some more and do a bit less. And then the procedure was kind of written that way. And it also, again, the whole training part, it highlighted a bit more, where do we need to be better of training? Where do we need to have some procedures? Where do we need to have some databases of different information to make it easier for the people working with it? So that's kind of, so you can say this is phase 2, where we really kind of mature a lot paper-wise and process-wise.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. So I think, going back to what Rasmus, you were saying earlier about preparing the organization and preparing the team, were there any things that, the two of you, Rasmus and Harold, had to do in terms of like in the planning of phase 2, in terms of preparing on the Agreena side? Is there anything that you guys did?
Well, just to be clear again about the timeline, I think we started working for real on this until we had gone through the first phase of KYC collection. We had dealt with the issues that we found, and we had designed and approved a setup with risk assessment and policies and roles and responsibilities and all that, and had a plan for phase 2, and decided to hire a risk officer. All that happened in a time span of 6 months, and I think again that's extraordinary. And if we had looked at it from the beginning, I would never have thought that was possible. But we needed something more scalable when we came through the first phase, and that was clear. And in order to do that, we had to strengthen the organization. I mentioned that we've hired a risk officer now, who has started recently. We have, and that has just strengthened the whole setup. We needed to start preparing for how can we deal with our next harvest year, which was a lot, or will be a lot, several orders of a factor of 2 to 3 larger than the one we just went through, and that means that we simply needed something more scalable, and we had to start working on that. And that was just at that end of phase 1/2. Then we just needed something more robust.
Yeah, absolutely. So then, in getting started with phase 2, so we're in kind of this second tranche, if you will. Maybe Harold, in terms of the training and reinforcing the SOP, the standard operating procedure, how did you guys find that in CS? Did you have to like hire more people, or was the training kind of a sufficient level, in terms of what your team was working on with the KYC, in addition to your CS, tasks with your customers?
I think we have definitely hired more people. As we're now covering, we need to cover more customers and more countries. So there is a ever developing, could you say, part of training. Like we need to keep people training and keep them up to date on how we are doing this, how we are handling this. But also the procedure has changed quite a lot from phase 1 to phase 2. So there has been quite a big aspect of training my colleagues and how to handle this, and also to get them to understand the KYC, as also new hires haven't heard of that much about KYC. So in general, we'll keep practicing and keep training, but at the same time, we have also accepted that the procedure is evolving and changing. And as Rasmus just mentioned, we now have a risk officer. So he's kind of taking over this entire project, and will probably also give his input on once he's kind of gotten into to his that he has gotten into what his role and so on. So we are ready, but it has been a lot of training and a lot of hiring new people.
Sune, maybe for phase 2, like, in terms of like your experience as you were going through phase 2, working with Agreena, what were some of your sort of observations or points that you noticed?
Yeah, but I think first of all, we spent a lot of time with Agreena building these procedures together with Rasmus and the risk assessment and all that. And then it was also Agreena asked us if we also could do more of the KYC process. So we are now not only handling the screening process for Agreena, but also most of the KYC process to ease up what happens in the customer success team. Some more of the background work where customer is not directly involved. So that's also, of course, been a big task for us to kind of scale our team and prepare for getting all kind of documents and information from farmers and review that and approve that and do risk scoring and all that.
I think, you know, Rasmus and Sune, you both mentioned this, but I will do a small sort of shameless plug that Avallone, and to be fair, as Rasmus put it, we developed this a service offering together, but we have actually a very robust now managed service. So this is where we have a team of people who can be kind of the helping hands for our customers' teams, doing some of the things like the day-to-day tasks that require attention to detail, but they're rigorous. They're very KYC specific, and they don't, you know, we want to help your team have your focus on the strategic matters for what they're, you know, wanting to focus on. So then we can, for example, like go through the initial screening or do some of more of that kind of heavy lifting, if you will. We also worked with, you know, some advisory services, which we have now, which is kind of what I like to think of a little bit as like a fractional chief risk or chief compliance officer. And what I mean by that is, you know, the fractional part being that it's a knowledgeable, very experienced team. And if there's any specific situations or guidance or recommendations that a customer needs, then we can, you know, provide that for the overall direction of your KYC program or give some sort of like high level, but targeted guidance according to that. I think maybe with that, you know, I'd love to see a little bit on the Agreena side. What was your experience working with these managed and advisory services, like in terms of how we've helped, or if you would recommend this to anyone?
Yeah, I would. Rasmus, you go ahead.
No, okay, let me start. I think it's been a key to making this operational to us, and I think it's been super important for us to see how Avallone have gone from delivering a screening result to now delivering. Not only do you handle most of the collection process, but you also deliver a recommendation when there is a screening result. And that makes a world of difference if what you get is we have had this result. We think it's a small, medium, large risk. We think this is what we recommend you do, because then it becomes a question of how we see that recommendation fitting into our business, and then we could take it from there. In the original setup, we had to do the assessment and see how severe is this, and that was frankly a difficult task when you're not an expert. So it's helped us tremendously.
That's great to hear. Harold, what
Yeah,
about you?
Yeah, I would definitely second what Rasmus just said, and from my perspective as a customer success employee, then I would also I have to. Yeah, I'm not an KYC expert, so it was quite a big task, and for us to being able to scale it and scale our business, I think it was important for us to kind of get away from these from handling the screening and so on. So it's really been a huge help for us that you have taken over and that you have started offering these services. So I definitely recommend them.
That's great to hear. We're really happy about that. So now that we're rounding the last 10-15 minutes of the hour, I want to kind of like start looking back on this extremely fast maturity that Agreena has gone through. What would you guys do the same, and what would you do differently? Maybe Rasmus, you could start.
Yeah, well, one thing is that I wish we got started earlier to prepare the organization. But on the other hand, when you're a startup, you do things when you absolutely need to do them. And before we were in the situation where we had decided to pay the farmers, we didn't really have the need. At the same time, it was also important that the the farmers could see a reason why they should go through this. So there's that, but on the other hand, I think, as I mentioned before, the training and support of the CS team would definitely be something that I would recommend spending a little more time on than we did. I think we caught up during the process, but we definitely underestimated the strain on the organization.
Noted. How about you, Harold?
Yeah, I think like what I would like, what would you do the same with like the communication and the availability from your side and back and forth have been really good. We have been able to kind of handle all these different challenges that we have seen during the way. But as Rasmus mentioned, I think that one thing that we would have done differently would be have a bit more time to develop this and maybe even also to test it a bit. This was very much developed and then presenting it towards the farmers, and then based on that develop again. So maybe a bit more time would have been really good from our side, but at the same time we always willing to accept that things are developing quite rapidly in here. So yeah.
Yeah, that is the startup life. I know it well too. It's always you always wish you had more time, but it's good to just get started and iterate and kind of build on that to work. So now that we are in phase 2, I feel like we're kind of in the midst of it, or kind of tailing into thinking about starting phase 3 or kind of moving forwards, if you will. What are all of you kind of doing and thinking in terms of like, now that you got started at phase 1, you matured the program in phase 2, what would be your phase 3 and onwards, or what are some future looking steps? I'm not sure if maybe Rasmus, maybe if you want to start with that.
Yeah, I can start. Well, first of all, keep progressing on the maturity. We've taken a giant leap forward with the new risk officer, and we're really starting to push our own knowledge in that area much more than somebody a generalist like myself and those who were involved in it can do. So that's extremely helpful. We've also seen that as we mature our business, we're actually subject to more and more requests on KYC from people who want to work with us, and that's especially financial institutions that obviously need to take Agreena through their KYC process. And we've actually recently started using the responder module also, including the managed service for that, because we're simply being overrun with KYC requests at the moment. So suddenly we're taking a little bit of our own medicine. In addition to that, what we can see is that the fact that we have a KYC set up and we can document that we collect this information on our customers and also do an ongoing screening of them, that has actually turned into an asset for us when we do talk to potential investors and to banks and others that are somehow involved in financing our operations or doing business with us, and who might themselves be under regulation, or simply being a little bit concerned about what is all this with carbon credits, and can we trust this business, and do they even know what their business is building on? And the fact that we can document right away, well, we have collected all this information, we keep collecting it, we keep screening our counterparties, and we're responsive if new sanctions or other restrictions are imposed. That just makes a world of difference in terms of our counterparties actually trusting who we are and what we do, and that we have our risks under control.
Great. That's a lot of really again, I always admire how forward thinking you are, and also Agreena. So I think those are great. How about you, Harold? What are some of your sort of next steps that you're looking at for phase 3?
I think that like putting all of the learnings into actual material that like an actual tools that we can keep using and keep developing in, because we kind of had to accept that it wasn't perfect in either phase 2 and either phase 1 or phase 2. So kind of accepting that we have to be able to develop within also phase 3 and phase 4 and going onwards, and also that we have to build a tool that is scalable for us, and maybe even going broader than we are covering right now. So it's about a lot for me. My side is the learnings, and also in general all the learnings about KYC and how can we develop, and how do we see the model and the process between two companies also develop. So I see that phase 3 will be way more refined and defined, and then we will probably have a great KYC product come phase 3.
Very cool. So I wanted to actually take a look. We had a couple of questions, and some of them I feel like we've answered in the course of our conversation. But one I don't think that we've actually really, that's quite interesting, is that the person asks, do you see any disadvantages when delegating KYC to help externals? Any plans to bring this in-house? Yeah, Rasmus or Harold, if you have any comments on answering that.
Yeah, obviously you take a risk when you outsource a key process. It was not really an option for us to have it in our house at the time. How the setup will be in the future, I don't know. I think, to be honest, both the advantage and the curse of Avallone is that they were able to do it, and probably the only ones who could do it. So there is a certain dependency here. On the other hand, I think one of the key learnings that we've had is that if something is really it may not have gone wrong, but potentially go wrong, you also need somebody to call in such a situation. And we were very lucky both to have Avallone, but also have other external advisors with strong hands-on experience in financial crime prevention, and that means that if we get into a situation where we really need to respond quickly, we know who to call, and could it be cheaper internally? Maybe, not at this scale, I think. But obviously, if we had been a bank, then we might look into that. It's just not relevant for us, especially because this is not core business. And we're focused on growing our carbon program and our capabilities within that. And if we were to develop a full setup for this, it would take away the resources and the focus from our core business.
Interesting. Very cool. So now that I don't see any other questions that have come in, so I think in our last couple of minutes, I wanted the three of you to have any kind of final parting thoughts to share. Maybe actually I'll start with you, Sune, and then we'll talk to Harold and Rasmus. So Sune, what are your kind of final thoughts on this?
Yeah, but I think first of all, it has been really fun to learn so much about agriculture and carbon certificates and how that works on farmers in Europe. But I also really am impressed about kind of the journey they have been through. So from nothing to quite mature setup already now, but I can also see it still growing. They have hired a risk officer, starting integrate Avallone with some of the other systems using APIs, broaden out the scope of where they want to collect KYC from. So I think we can just see that the maturity increase all the time, which I think is amazing.
Very cool. How about you, Harold? What are your final thoughts?
I think it's kind of the other way around from my side, is that I have learned everything that I almost know about KYC from working with you, which have been so much fun and very interesting to see this this side of it. I have an agricultural background, so I had not that much idea about financial crime prevention and so on. And then also from, as I mentioned before, I think in this process is accepting that that you're maybe not spot on the first time, but take the learnings from you do on the way, and then bring them into your further work and your further development. So so that's that's my key takeaways or thoughts on this.
Yeah, super cool. And Rasmus, for you, your parting words to
I
share with
think
the audience?
it's mostly been covered already. I just want to say that, you know, a friend in need is a friend indeed, and when you get into a situation and you don't know what to do, then it's important to have somebody to lean on. And then second to that, I'm in awe of what our CS team has actually been able to absorb during that time. It was a little bit on the crazy side, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely unprecedented, and I think like bravo to everyone at Agreena, the CS team, like you said, for going on this journey and having us. We have the honor of joining Agreena on their KYC journey. So I think just to wrap up, I want to thank you, Rasmus and Harold, for spending the time today and talking, you know, to our audience about your KYC journey. I also want to thank Sune for your time and your knowledge. So, you know, I really appreciate all three of you being able to join in and share your experiences with everyone here. For anyone who's watching this after today's session on a replay, if you do have any follow-up questions, again, we're always here to help. So we'll have an email in the webpage that we'll share later on, but you can always send us an email at hello@avallone.io, and somebody will get back to you with some answers. So thank you for your time today. Have a great day, everyone. We'll see you soon.
See you.